ever think about, like how a tiny misstep in a court case, like a small rule overlooked, could change the whole outcome, even for someone accused of a serious crime? Like, what if that slip up was about the evidence itself?
Yeah, it's wild how much weight those procedures carry.
Right. Today we're looking at a Supreme Court decision that really got people talking, made
Yeah.
everyone think about how crucial it is to follow the rules even when things seem straightforward.
Oh, absolutely.
Could a technicality outweigh the facts?
That's what we're going to unpack today.
Exactly. Let's find out.
So we're doing a deep dive into the Supreme Court of the Philippines ruling
Okay.
in People of the Philippines v. Marvin Bolado y NavalG.R. No, 227356.
Got it.
Decided October 16, 2019.
Okay.
This case, it was all about an alleged illegal drug sale, specifically shabu, and it really highlighted this thing called the chain of custody.
Right.
And for anyone listening, this is such a good example of how carefully our legal system looks at procedures, and what can happen when those procedures aren't followed to the letter.
It's like where the theory meets reality.
Exactly, and the consequences are huge.
Okay, so let's break down what went down in this case.
Sure.
The records show that back on July 5, 2012,
Okay.
the police got a tip from a confidential informant
Right.
about someone called Barak, who was apparently selling drugs in Bananganan, Rizal.
So they got this intel, and PO2 Jeffrey Mahala, along with other officers, they went to check out the area around the Family Lodge Hotel.
Surveillance.
Yep, they were watching for activity,
Mhm.
seeing if anything matched what the informant described, and they reported seeing what looked like drug deals happening.
Oh, wow.
With this man they later identified as Barak, who turned out to be Marvin Bolado y Naval, the appellant in the case.
So based on this observation,
Mm.
they decided to set up a buy-bust operation.
Classic tactic.
Yeah, and they chose PO2 Mahala to be the poser buyer,
Yeah.
the officer pretending to buy the drugs.
Right.
And they even got 3 P100 bills all marked so they could track them later.
Smart.
Yeah, so the buy-bust team went back to the area near the Family Lodge Hotel,
Okay.
PO2 Mahala, and the informant approached the appellant.
Uh-huh.
And the informant asked if they had anything, you know, which is like a common way to inquire about drugs, I guess.
Yeah, pretty standard.
The appellant then asked how much they wanted, and the informant said P300 worth.
Setting up the deal.
Yeah, and this is where the alleged sale happened.
Okay.
The testimony in court said that the appellant took out a plastic sachet with a white crystalline substance thought to be shabu from his pocket
Okay.
and gave it to PO2 Mahala in exchange for the marked money.
Exchange made.
Right after PO2 Mahala signaled the rest of the team and they arrested the appellant.
Okay, so they got him.
Yeah, and right there on the spot, PO2 Mahala marked the sachet with his initials, JBM.
Oh, right at the scene.
Yep. They also did an inventory of what they seized right there, too,
Okay.
which is a super important part of the procedure.
Huge.
And it was reportedly done with a media representative present named Tata Ray Abella. Later, they took photos of the appellant and the drugs, but that was at the police station, not at the scene.
Oh, okay.
The substance was sent to the crime lab, and it tested positive for methamphetamine hydrochloride.
So it was definitely shabu.
Yeah. But, marking it right there, that's like the first crucial step in that whole chain of custody thing.
Exactly. Got to have that clear link.
Okay, so it seems like the police did their thing,
Mm-hmm.
got an arrest, seized the drugs, but then what happened when it went to court?
All right, so Marvin Bolado y Naval, he's officially charged in the Regional Trial Court,
Yeah.
RTC,
Okay.
with violating Section 5 of RA 9165, which is about selling illegal drugs.
Right.
He pleaded not guilty, and the trial began.
So what did the prosecution present to prove he was guilty?
Their main evidence was PO2 Mahala's testimony describing the whole buy-bust.
Okay.
They also had forensic chemist Bone Villaraza, who confirmed the substance was shabu.
Right.
And they had documents like the police blotter, the pre-operation report, and
Good.
the chemistry report.
All the paperwork. What about the defense? What was their side of the story?
Their defense was that he couldn't have been selling drugs at that time because he was at the police station.
What?
Yeah, they claimed he'd been in a motorcycle accident earlier that day and was there reporting it.
So basically saying he was framed.
Pretty much they argued he was falsely accused.
Wow. So two totally different stories.
Yeah, a real he said, she said situation.
So what did the trial court decide?
The RTC sided with the prosecution,
Okay.
saying they believed the police officer's story, and even using this legal principle,
Which is?
the presumption of regularity in the performance of official duties.
Okay.
Like the court initially trusts that the police did things right,
Interesting.
They also decided that the chain of custody of the drugs was properly done and didn't buy the appellant's alibi.
So they found him guilty?
Yep, guilty as charged.
But he didn't stop there, right? He
No.
appealed to the Court of Appeals.
Exactly. He wasn't giving up.
What were his arguments this time?
He brought up several points. He said the confidential informant never testified in court,
Oh, interesting.
and the original marked money wasn't presented as evidence.
Hmm.
Also, he pointed out that while they did the inventory at the scene, they didn't take the photos there. And importantly, that inventory was only witnessed by the media representative, not the other people required by law.
Who are those? Kid?
It's supposed to be the accused or their representative, a media person, a DOJ representative, and an elected official.
Why so many people?
It's all about transparency,
Mhm.
making sure everything's above board.
Okay.
And lastly, he argued his arrest was illegal, which could make the evidence inadmissible.
So he was attacking the whole process?
Yeah, trying to show there were holes in the case.
What did the Court of Appeals say to all that?
They upheld the RTC's decision.
Oh, wow.
They said there was substantial compliance with the chain of custody, meaning they thought even if things weren't perfect, the drug's integrity was still okay.
I see.
And they leaned on that presumption of regularity again and dismissed his claims.
So even with those arguments about procedure, the lower court still said he was guilty.
It's tough to overturn a guilty verdict once it's there.
Yeah, that makes sense. So after two courts saying guilty,
Yep.
the case finally goes to the Supreme Court. What was the big question for them?
The main issue was whether the chain of custody for the alleged drug was done right,
Right.
as required by RA 9165,
Yeah.
the Comprehensive Dangerous Drugs Act of 2002.
It all comes back to that chain.
It's super important in drug cases
Yeah.
because the Supreme Court has said many times that the drug itself is the corpus delicti at the core of the crime.
Okay.
So the prosecution has to prove without a doubt that the drugs they seized are the same ones in court.
No room for error.
Nope.
What was the Supreme Court's decision?
Well, this is where things get interesting.
Okay.
The Supreme Court reversed the Court of Appeals decision
Wow.
and acquitted Marvin Bolado y Naval.
Really?
Yep. They were very clear that you have to follow the chain of custody rule exactly as it's written in Section 21 of RA 9165 and its rules.
Wow, so they took that seriously.
They did. They laid out the 4 key parts of the chain.
Let's hear them.
First, the officer seizes the drug and marks it right away.
Okay.
Second, they give the drug to the investigating officer. Third, the drug goes to the forensic chemist for testing.
Right.
And finally, the marked drug is submitted to the court as evidence.
4 clear steps.
Exactly.
So which part of this did the Supreme Court say was missing in this case?
They focused on that very first step.
Okay.
They said that while PO2 Mahila did mark the drug at the scene,
Right.
the inventory and photos weren't done with all the necessary witnesses.
Ah, there it is.
The law is super specific. It says you need the accused or their rep,
Okay.
a media person, a DOJ representative, and an elected official.
All those people.
Yeah, and it's to have those independent eyes on the process.
Yeah.
No. Funny business.
Makes sense. So who did the prosecution have?
They only showed that the media representative Tadarea Bello was there for the inventory.
And not the others?
Nope, no proof of the DOJ person or the elected official. And even worse, they didn't give any reason why those people were missing.
Oh, that doesn't look good.
The Supreme Court even mentioned past cases like People v. Martin, where they said not explaining that kind of thing makes the evidence look unreliable.
So basically, they didn't do their due diligence.
Pretty much.
I bet the prosecution argued they substantially complied, though, right?
Oh, for sure. That's a common argument.
And the Court of Appeals agreed with that.
Right. But the Supreme Court shut it down.
They did.
Yeah, they said that saving clause in the rules.
The one that allows for some leeway?
Yeah. That didn't apply here because the prosecution didn't give any good reason for not having those witnesses.
No justifiable excuse.
Nope. And without that, the Supreme Court couldn't just assume everything was done properly.
So that presumption of regularity the lower courts used?
Right. The Supreme Court said that Vida Martin can't replace actually following the rules.
Oh, wow.
They were very clear that even though courts may initially trust the police, that trust can be broken if there's clear evidence of a mistake like here.
And that missing witness was enough to break that trust.
Exactly. And they even mentioned People v. Crispo, another case, where they said appeals courts have to really check if the chain of custody was followed, even if it wasn't a big issue before.
Because it's so important.
Exactly. It affects the evidence and the accused person's freedom.
So basically, one missing person changed the whole outcome.
Yeah, it's amazing how much weight those procedures carry.
This case really shows how seriously the Supreme Court takes those rules in drug cases.
Oh, absolutely. The chain of custody isn't just some pointless paperwork.
Right.
It's a protection against tampering or doubts about the drugs.
Okay.
If those procedures aren't followed perfectly right from the start,
As we saw here.
yeah, it can lead to someone being acquitted even if there was a drug sale.
It's kind of shocking.
The point is the prosecution has to prove every single detail beyond a reasonable doubt.
And that includes the chain of custody.
Exactly.
So with how vital this chain of custody is in these drug cases.
What does this ruling say about the balance between police procedure and the rights of the accused?
It's a great question.
And how might it affect future drug cases and how law enforcement works in the Philippines?
Well, this ruling is a huge reminder that procedure isn't just a formality.
Right.
It's a safeguard to protect people's rights.
Okay.
It forces law enforcement to be super careful and follow the rules from the moment they seize anything.
So it's like raising the bar?
Exactly.
You think we'll see more challenges to the chain of custody in future cases?
I think it's very likely courts will be paying even closer attention to it now.
Makes sense.
And we might see police departments doing more training to make sure their officers don't mess up those procedures and risk having their cases thrown out.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on this decision?
Yeah, what do you think?
Share your comments with us. And if you found this deep dive insightful, hit that favorite button.
And before we wrap up,
Yeah.
let's recap those key legal concepts we talked about.
Good idea. First, we have the chain of custody, that unbroken sequence from seizure to presentation in court,
Right.
making sure the drugs are the same ones the whole time.
No tampering.
Exactly. Then there's corpus delicti in drug cases, which is just a fancy way of saying the drug itself.
Got it.
The prosecution has to prove it exists and that it's what they say it is.
With certainty.
Yep. Then we talked about the presumption of regularity, that idea that we assume officials do their jobs right.
But it's not a guarantee.
Nope. And if there's evidence to the contrary, it can be overturned.
Which is what happened here.
Right. And lastly, there's the saving clause in RA 9165.
The one with some flexibility.
Yeah. But only if there's a good reason for not following the rules exactly, and if the evidence is still good.
And it's up to the prosecution to prove both those things.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this has been a fascinating look at a case with huge implications.
For sure.
If you want to explore more cases like this and get insights into the forces shaping our world,
And the law.
make sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive.
You won't miss a single episode where we unpack the complexities of everything around us.
Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.
Bye.